My name is Drew Patterson, and I'm the General Manager of Treetime.ca, and we're going to talk about some of the differences between suburban and acreage type shelter belts. Many years ago, there was a big boom on people planting sections with shelter belts, and they would go all the way around the property, and they would organize it into a lot of other smaller segments that allowed soil erosion to not occur and allowed greater moisture to be left in the fields, greater pollination of their crop, etc. This was a very common thing with field shelter belts. And then 100-foot wide combines came in, and they get in the way of some of these things, and no-tills, drill seeders, etc. help get in the way of some of those things too. So some people have been dropping them. Not everybody, there's lots of people that still see the value, and we see the value as well, and I hope that you do too. But there are differing opinions and differing economic reasons for doing those things. I'll leave those things up to you to decide. So when you think about a suburban shelter belt, it's a smaller acreage, and you may not have as much in the way of spacing, etc. You want to use the land and your area to as much advantage as you possibly can. Chances are good you're not going to get it 100 feet away from your neighbor's property or your house or some other things. So you want to plan it. You want to make sure that you don't have invasive willow growing too close to a septic field. That would be catastrophic. That would be a problem. You want to plan for those things up front and in advance. So you'll see a lot of people will purposely plant something like a certain, what I call milestone trees, but they're really just center point type trees. They'll like, on this corner I want a big bur oak, and that's going to take 50 years, but it's worth it. I'm going to plant it right here, and then there'll be another central large tree. I'm going to plant a couple of big elm here. Those can be slower growing species. The elm will grow at a decent rate, but the bur oak might take a while. You'll find that people are growing a wider range of diversity in between there, and they're mixing up the spacing as well. It's not a linear thing. They're planting it with zigzags, offsets. They might have a cluster of one species and then a cluster of another species. They might plant them closer together than they would typically, especially for understory or mid-story type trees. They use things like hawthorn that only get to like 20 feet tall, like the Arnold hawthorn or the roundleaf hawthorn, and they use them in interesting ways. In suburban areas, you're much more likely also to come up with areas where you have overhead power lines that you have to watch out for. So using trees and their heights to the right effect will help you a fair bit. Don't plant tall growing trees underneath or anywhere nearby power lines. You're setting yourself up for disaster. Don't plant poplars or Swedish aspen right next to your garage pad or the sidewalk if it's going to buckle it. You want to give it some space or you'll have problems. In a suburban setting, you have to get a little bit more creative to get the same function, and because the design cannot be the same. Often there's a lot more constraints, and you need to put a little bit extra thought into it. Acreage owners can get away with a little bit less planning. Suburban shelter belts should be the most well planned. If you do it and you do it right, it can add a significant amount of value to your property. Imagine driving down your driveway covered by amber maple with a gorgeous red fall color, or a really nice northern red oak growing in the center of your front yard as a centerpiece for your yard. That's gorgeous red color. And you don't want to miss out on some of those opportunities. So go to some arboretums, go check out your neighbor's yard, see some things, be interested in things. Let your kids know that you're going to stop the car and you're going to get out and look at some of those other trees and shrubs that catch your interest, because they should. And if you're wanting to build an environment that you're happy to come home to every day, that you're proud to have, and you don't even want to leave and go on vacation because it's so gorgeous this time of year, then you need to do those things. You need to plan to be a part of the environment. In suburban settings, you want to plant things that you really know the growth habit of, so that you know that it's not going to have problems with the interaction with your neighbors, with your infrastructure, or with any of the nearby overhead power lines or something similar. That means growing with trees that perhaps aren't going to sucker quite as much, don't have as much of a seed load. Perhaps you know the height and it's fairly consistent that it grows about that height in this part of the world. You want to know with certainty that what you're doing is not going to cost you a ton more in maintenance later, or that you're going to have to sacrifice your dreams and cut everything back because that was the wrong plan for this place. Plants that really need a lot of extra space are things like American elm. You're not going to plant a whole row of American elm. Siberian elm, similarly, you would not want to plant that in a suburban acreage type setting. Some of the suburban municipalities or districts have laws against actually planting hybrid poplar in their areas. If you're too close to a major center, they may want to put sidewalks by at some time, or they may have troubles with infrastructure themselves. with hybrid poplar. You might also not want to plant too many of the prunus genus of trees like chokecherry. It might be susceptible to black knot, and that means a little bit extra maintenance. You can get some really gorgeous trees, but think about it. The maintenance, if you're going to set it and forget it, you don't want something that's going to get black knot and then it's going to infect all your neighbors. You want to be a good neighbor. You want to steward and shape your landscape. In suburban settings, tower poplar is not really a great pick. It does sucker heavily and grows quite large. You might be able to get away with some Swedish aspen, but you want to make sure that you're going to plant it in the right place. Hybrid poplar is often not the best thing to be growing in a suburban environment, especially if you're under 5 acres. If you're over that 10 acre, you might be able to get away with it and use it in a good way. But let's face it, in suburban type areas, acreages are smaller. And those are a few of the things you should be thinking about when you're designing a suburban shelter belt versus an acreage type shelter belt. Those are the considerations that you want to take a closer look at.